Cancer, huh?
Yeah, that's fun.
How do you feel about that? I mean, one thing I wanted to ask you is, I mean, it took me a while to convince you that the non-surgical, natural, off the chemo and radiation might be okay, right? So what did you do when you first started? Huh?
When this first started, I was diagnosed. I mean, my ultimate diagnosis was stage 1 breast cancer in my left breast, and I did choose to have a lumpectomy. And it's one of those things where I think now, if it were to happen again, I wouldn't have the surgery. I would wait 6 months and see what happened and do some more work on that. But for me, I really felt that that was a catalyst for change, and it also, the cancer represented something very deep and emotional in pain in relation to family system work, and it represented having that exit my body and exit my spirit. So it played a role in that. But through my work with Life Enthusiast, and particularly through your mentorship, Martin, and just being such a close friend and always being one to hold me accountable with love and grace given at the same time, was that I chose to not do chemo, not do radiation, and not do estrogen therapy. And part of the work that I do in my own business life is around research, and I took 1 week off to have surgery, and then I took another week off to do research and really find out for myself the statistics. And ultimately, I am now an absolute advocate for changing the medical paradigm we're given. I feel strongly, based on the evidence, not based on an emotional response, but on the evidence, that chemotherapy, radiation, and estrogen therapy are not the right tactics, and in fact do more harm than good, particularly chemotherapy and radiation, that there are alternatives to that outside of those 3 methods. Surgery, I believe in some cases is important, but in many, many cases is not necessary, because we are too pre-screened for cancer, and that things that are called cancer are actually just pre-cancerous conditions that if you dealt with on a different level could go away on its own. And even if you didn't deal with them, I think some go away on their own. So that's basically my philosophy on everything, except for, I must say, in 3 situations where I would consider those are for testicular cancer, childhood leukemia, and some adult lymphomas. However, I must say they come with really serious side effects, so you must still compare quality of life versus longevity of life for each particular patient. When you are looking at any medical intervention, such as a pharmaceutical medication for depression, heart disease, or if you're looking at even having any type of heart surgery or any type of surgery, what they give you is the relative risk instead of the absolute risk. And the big difference is, in an absolute risk, you are comparing the real reality between who will live if one group chooses the medical intervention and if one group doesn't. So for instance, if there are 100 women in 2 different groups that get breast cancer and are told, if you take chemo, radiation, and estrogen therapy, 1 out of 100 women will die within 10 years. And if you take the women who are not getting therapy, 2 out of 100 women will die if you don't take the therapy. The relative risk you are given by the oncologist when you are sitting in that office, scared out of your mind because of the fear that comes with cancer diagnosis in this world, is 50%. That is the difference between the 1 person that died and the 2 people that died
out of 100.
Out of 100.
Yeah.
But the reality is, the absolute risk is actually only 1%, because there is only 1% difference between 1 woman living and 2 women living. And they
so even though it doubled, quote unquote, your chances.
Yes, it actually doesn't. It doesn't double the death rate. So it's a very hard concept for some people to wrap their head around, and I confess it took me a really long time to figure it out completely. But when I went into that oncologist and I knew that one piece of information, which if you don't take anything else away, when you go to see your doctor, if you know to just say, I want that in absolute risk, not relative risk, you will have a true risk percentage that you can look at and say, should I do this treatment or shouldn't I do this treatment? And when I met with my oncologist and I asked for that number, he said to me that we don't usually give that to women because women don't understand it. This was at the second largest cancer facility in British Columbia, and I find that appalling, and I told him that not to worry, that I would understand it, and that I would not leave here and not make one single decision without that information. And he went and got it. It took about 20 minutes, but he went and got it. And afterwards, when I turned down the chemo, he didn't agree with me, but he also said that if he was a woman that had breast cancer, then he would want me advocating on his behalf. So, interesting
Yes,
statement.
awesome. What an approval.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So you now get to try and explain to others just how the fear machine works. Mm-hmm. It is really that, right? It's mainly about fear.
It is an absolute fear machine, and I think when you were talking at the beginning of our conversation about that I think it's also fear, and I think it's two things. I think it's fear, and I also think it's wanting to be a victim to something as opposed to taking charge of something. Because it's so, when you enter into that system, everyone supports you in that system. Everyone brings you tea and dinner, and your husband might not get as angry at you, and your friends might cut you slack, and anyone that you were having negative relationships with will give you a pass for a while, and you get to go on medical leave, and when people see you in the stores and you're bald from the chemo and everyone is so sensitive to you, and you are given so much support that you may not be given elsewhere, and it's really easy. I made the choice that I didn't want people's support, I wanted my personal power. And it really comes down, I was thinking about that on your way over to visit us today, and I thought I made the decision that I would not give up my personal power for support. And so that's really hard to do when you're at the moment of intense fear, and honestly, I don't know if I could have done it if I hadn't had you and people like you and my husband who said no matter what, I'll stand beside this decision for power. If I didn't have people pushing me in that direction and saying you can do it, and I consider myself a really strong woman, I was almost ready to give in to that system of fear and that join the club and be one of us, and it was really hard to walk away.